Hello and welcome back to Southsidewesteros. I am D. Paul, your master of whispers, and today we will talk about the Brotherhood without banners. Now, if you're a Game of Thrones fans, you know who they are. But if you're not, you can still listen, but I do suggest you do watch the show along with listening to the podcast. It's a great companion. That was a plug. But you will enjoy it. So go back and listen to my innumerable episodes. And if you can't get enough of those, you can always go over to our Patreon or Buy Me Coffee, where we have secret episodes available only to you, a patron of the show. So, without further ado, the Brotherhood Without Banners is an outlaw band working against Lannister interest in the Riverlands mostly at the time of the War of the Five Kings. Now, know this. Their goal is to protect the small folk from any force preying on them, regardless of which king or lord they support. Now, we've talked about this in the past. George R.R. Martin's affinity for literature and where he draws a lot of his idealisms from. This Brotherhood Without Banners, if you're a literary fan, they draw immediate comparisons to Robin Hood and his band of merry men. They rob from the rich, they give to the poor, and they're romanticized. However, when you look at them in a realistic picture and a realistic view of how they would have survived and behaved, it would be more so like the Brotherhood Without Banners. And even though they've done some questionable things along the seasons that they appeared, which, fun fact, they were only in 2, 3, 6, 7, and 8, their position and intentions always seem to be noble. Some may not agree with me, some may, but we'll see. Now, also, this podcast is kind of special for some of you, and it may be redundant because we are currently recording this live through the Stereo app. Stereo is an app you can get on Apple or Google, Android, and it allows you to be a podcaster within seconds. So when you get a chance and when you're done listening to me, get over to the Stereo app, download it, and try it out. Everyone can be a star, and now anyone can be Stereo. So the group was indirectly created by Ned Stark, the Hand of the King, to Robert Baratheon when he sent out a force of knights and soldiers led by Beric Dondarrion to restore peace and justice in the Riverlands at the onset of the War of the Five Kings, bolstered by several of his own household guards, from House Stark in particular. And you'll find that there is a reverence for Ned Stark when they speak of him, regardless of who it is. Also, if you read the book, and again, we're talking about the show, but if you read the book, it'll give you a bigger view of who they are. They are more integral to the story, and they have several recruits, one in particular, that you'll be very surprised to hear. So please, I love the stories that we saw on HBO as much as you do, but you got to read the book. You're going to love it. Now, they were trapped behind enemy lines after the Battle of Mummer's Ford. And that's when they kind of became a guerrilla group. This is when they became that band of merry men living full-time out in the woods, surviving, and pretty much keeping the peace without any instruction. They were also joined by deserters from different armies in the war, as well as commoners trying to defend their homes. Now, you saw this throughout Game of Thrones, where a lot of these savage, rough and tough soldier men were really just going about the countryside, terrorizing the common folk. So a group like this was needed, and they did exist in real times. They were just unsupported because they were counter to sometimes what those in power wanted to happen. Now, this is not to say that I am a person who believes in vigilantism and going out and taking the law into your own hands. But in cases like this, where the law is overwhelmed, civil unrest, a war, it falls into the hands of the common man to restore peace and order in their particular area. We got away from that, people. We're too civilized. We got to get back to that, but within reason. But that's a subject for another podcast. But we'll get back on topic here. Now, following the Red Wedding, the Brotherhood became a force of resistance against the Lannisters and their allies in the north, and the Riverlands as well. But now they proved to be a particularly problematic force for House Frey. You know how I feel about House Frey. Most of you feel the same way. They rallied the commoners to revolt and to raid Frey's camps and supply trains. And again, this is that kind of, and you see, it's not just Robin Hood. You see it across all cultures. You see it in the Zorro character in Mexico. You see it across cultures. It's that the commoner, for the common man to revolt against the government. And it's, goes on in every generation, just like it's going on now. It's just in a different form. But they revolted, and they would rob the Freys, and they would even inform the Brotherhood of when the Freys were coming through. And so it caused them to be able to kind of be there. And how did they get here? Now, the Freys found themselves stretched thin with the Brotherhood's ongoing harassment. You never knew where they came from. They popped out of nowhere, and they were relentless. And the aging Walder was reluctantly forced to request support from his Lannister masters because he became a dog for the Lannisters. However, in recent years, the Brotherhood's, most of whom worshipped the Lord of Light, has turned its attention from warring High Lords to the White Walkers and the Army of the Dead, marching north to help with that fight. Now, we have, just want to go through, before we get into them and how they came to be, they had some really heavy hitters on their squad. Not just Beric and not just Thoros, but Anguy, a champion archer, Lem, Morgan, Steve, Rydell, Gattins, and of course the Hound, Sandor Clegane. Yes, I know you want his podcast. I know it. I want it too, but all good things come to those who wait, and he deserves the respect he deserves. That guy will probably be a 3 or 4 part podcast. He's that deep, but you know it. That's why you want it. But let's get into the history. Now, the Brotherhood without banners was formed in the aftermath of the Battle of Mum's Ford, as we spoke of. Ned Stark and Beric, we talked about that. They were supposed to bring Gregor Clegane, the brother of the Hound, the Mountain, in because he was harassing townsfolk, killing people. He was a terror to the Riverlands, okay? This guy was not a nice guy. I can't say anything good about him. He was a psychopath, and he was a psychopath from the moment he entered the world. Now, this was being done on the orders of Ned Stark, but you're going against Tywin Lannister. Okay? You got to remember this. So all of this, and the Brotherhood was kind of grazed over in the story on HBO. They go very detailed into it in the book, but they grazed over it because all of this was going on when Catelyn Stark took Tyrion hostage, and the whole beginning of it all got stuck in the beginning of the war. You see, you didn't get to see this. They cut this out, and I thought this was a travesty. Again, I have never accused HBO of not being lazy in writing. They're very lazy writers, and they sometimes miss this. And again, I spoke of having different views and everyone reading the book and wanting to see what they want. But Thoros of Myr alone would have been wonderful in the Red Keep. Beric, think about it, the interaction between Ned and Beric, all of these honorable men, all in the same room, this would have been wonderful. You didn't have to give them 10, 15 minutes of screen time, but 2, 3 minutes? Sure. Why not? HBO, listen to me. Hire me. Bring me on for House of Dragon. so that we won't have these issues again, okay? But over time, they began to feel that none of the factions in the War of the Five Kings were effectively looking out for the welfare of the commoners. This is what we kind of missed. This is what happened during that time. They were going out trying to keep the peace, but they saw that, okay, this is subjective. Who are you? Are any of you looking out for the people? We don't know. We're not sure. We don't see this. And Thoros himself, even though he's presented as a drunk, but he's a very deeply caring man, and that can be seen at how his whole character breaks apart when Beric dies. Every time Beric dies, you can see that he doesn't have the belief in himself. He has the belief in the Lord of Light. But these characters are deep, and they were not explored to their fullest. So I would love to see if they ever have a companion show, or maybe go back and do a Song of Ice and Fire, maybe from another perspective, or maybe recast it, do a small prequel. You need to dig into the Brotherhood. You can even have a show, and it doesn't have to be an ongoing thing. You can do one season, but have a show of the Brotherhood without banners. Of course, you would probably have to recast all of the characters. You may have a few narrated, but I would love to see this, because I feel that they're like Jedis in a way. But both the Starks and the Lannisters would burn out farms in the Riverlands just to deny the others' use of the crops. So you can understand why these guys started feeling disenfranchised, because I'm picking between the two worst. Kind of reminds you of a presidential race, right? No politics, just talking people. But the Brotherhood then decided to fight with no banners, i.e. becoming the Brotherhood with no banners. And they had no allegiance to any king or any war. They are only there to fight and defend the common people against raiding parties of soldiers who prey on the weak during war. Now, from the core group, which was originally set out by Ned Stark and contained some of its own household guards from Winterfell, the Brotherhood attracted new members during the course of the war. Guys would come and leave, as it was joined by Stark and Baratheon deserters, as well as simple commoners who wanted to defend their homes. In short, the Brotherhood are a ragtag but dangerous band of misfits who rob from the rich and give to the poor, making hit-and-run attacks, then retreating back into the forest. Guerrilla warfare. Now, in Season 2, at Harrenhal, the Lannisters' torturer known as the Tickler interrogates prisoners from a nearby village and demands to know where the Brotherhood is. This is what we were talking about earlier when we said the villagers would protect the Brotherhood because they were the only group that was strong enough to take what they wanted, but didn't. And so this was very appealing to a commoner back then who every day was a struggle just to live alone, without guaranteed food, without medical, just life in general, without some jerk with a banner coming by and taking everything you've killed yourself to get. Raping your daughters, taking all your food, and all in the name of some king who wouldn't spit on you if you were on fire. Now, what they are planning and which villagers were collaborating them, of course, the Tickler wants to know this because then they're afraid of these guys. This is what for any resource to be dedicated to one subject in a land where resources were very limited, it had to be because of fear. Now, after the poisoning of Amory Lorch, Clegane believes that the Brotherhood is responsible. Tywin considers the name to be grandiose for a band of, as he refers to, brigands and outlaws. And Tywin is angered that the Brotherhood is operating behind Lannister lines and harrying their forces with impunity. This is an affront to everything that Tywin Lannister is. As I've told you in his podcast, number 2, season 1, I've told you that Tywin Lannister was the only character that was equipped as is and that could have won the Game of Thrones if he was listened to. And being that he was that only character that was equipped, the Brotherhood would be just a form of rage for him, because he's not concerned with what the sheep have to say, because he is a lion. But this Brotherhood makes it so that the sheep are growing teeth. Now I have to be concerned, instead of being concerned with the thoughts of a higher mind. It's amazing. They do enough just being. Now we go to season 3, where following the escape from Harrenhal, Arya, Hot Pie, and Gendry are ambushed by the Brotherhood. And this is where we first see them really get an idea of who the Brotherhood is, and we get an idea of the individuals. Now the trio, they're questioned by Thoros, who mistakes them for war refugees and invites them back to a nearby inn for food and drink. Now, the Brotherhood also captures the Hound at this point. Now, before the Hound is shown, we see a moment between Thoros and Arya, and he kind of shows her that she's not really a good swords person. But at this point, they are going to get released. They just wanted to feed them a hot meal and send them on their way until the Hound identifies Arya. The Brotherhood then refuses to let Arya go, effectively making her a hostage. Meanwhile, Gendry chooses to join them. After he is set free by the Brotherhood, Sandor abducts Arya. Now let's rewind a little bit here. So there was a lot more in this scene, clearly. And I don't want to go through the whole scene by scene, but I kind of want to give you an idea of what I feel the Brotherhood's motivation here. Now, again, remember, the Brotherhood was initially created by Ned Stark, okay? So when you see Ned Stark's daughter, and knowing what's going on, knowing that she's missing, knowing that her brother is in open rebellion, knowing that her father had what happened to him happen. Knowing this, they cannot allow her to go out into the woods. They have a duty to keep her safe, to honor the memory of her father. Now, of course, they are going to request money for this because they need money to do what they do. They need money to operate and give back to the people. They need to eat. They need weapons. It is what it is. Your life is essentially on the run. Imagine you're not in a house, you're not in a job, but you have to get your needs filled every single day. So you have to look for every opportunity you can. That's not being evil, it's being realistic. So they sold Hot Pie to the inn to pay their bill. So some of you must have said, oh my God, that's so horrible. Well, honestly, I thought that was one of the most altruistic things they could have done, meaning that that was the nicest thing they could have done for Hot Pie. Hot Pie would not have survived on the road. Hot Pie would have been killed very, very quickly. Hot Pie never was a survivor, and he only survived by those who were around him, and he wouldn't have made it. That was the best thing they could have done for Hot Pie, which is getting him somewhere. First of all he talked about was eating and drinking and making food. That's what he does. You kind of saw, the end of the story later on, right? So he was happy. So I feel that this was honorable. And then with Gendry, they kept Gendry. And initially, he was going to be a brother. I love saying brother. I love it. But he was going to be a brother to them. But then it was a request made by the priestess of who they follow, the Lord of Light. Now, where they may not have agreed or even understood what she wanted him for, they followed the Lord of Light. Therefore, they have to follow the priestess. So, when they did this, Arya ran away, and they set the Hound free once he killed Beric, and Thoros brought Beric back through his prayers and the power of the Lord of Light. And that's when Sandor abducts Arya. Now, they don't have time to figure out, where she is at this point. They have to chalk it up to a loss because, and then again, I've heard this. I've had a lot of DMs on the subject. I think a lot of you call me, text me and DM me, just random subjects so we can discuss, and I love that. Please do, because it gives me a lot of ideas for future podcasts. But one in particular, they were very upset at them, and they know that I view them with a high regard. And they said, well, if they're so high and mighty, why wouldn't they go looking for Aya? Well, they can't. They have the entire world looking to kill them. They just don't have the time. They have to dip and dodge and run, because just because they run across a commoner doesn't mean that that's necessarily a commoner who likes them. This is a destitute society. Everyone's looking for their next paycheck. So a commoner may see them and go tell because they need some money or they just want some favor. So it's not as cut and dry as you may seem. It may seem. So at the end of season 3, we don't see them again all the way until season 6, where Lothar Frey and Walder Rivers report to their father that, besides the River Lords rising against House Frey, the Brotherhood is rallying the commoners against them still. Remember, the Brotherhood can't stand House Frey. They disgust them. And it's striking against their supply lines and camps in the Riverlands. Now, the Freys find themselves stretched out too thin to take Riverrun and asks for the Lannisters to give them help. Now, 3 riders scout out rebuilding small folk. Among them is the Hound, who at this point had fought Brienne of Tarth prior, fell and was left for dead by Brienne and Aya. The riders demanded whatever supplies that they can get, though the leader of the community, Ray, who wonderful creature, wonderful portrayal, wonderful, tells them that they have nothing to offer. The riders depart with an excerpt of a prayer to the Lord of the Light, and the Hound realizes that they are from the Brotherhood. The community is later found dead to a man, and the Brotherhood is implied to be responsible. The entire community. Now, again, we're gonna press pause a little bit. We're gonna break, and I'm gonna go over that. There was a lot that happened. That was a paragraph that I just told you, but there was a lot that happened in that, because this was the Hound's retribution. This was the one place where people didn't look at the Hound as a creature. These were good people who were only looking to serve their God. And that's what makes this so egregious and Brotherhood-like. It wasn't the fact that the Brotherhood did this. It was that the Brotherhood did this. Let me explain that. It wasn't just that the Brotherhood was responsible, but it was because of what the Brotherhood stood for that they can do something so egregious, so evil, so vile. No, we cannot stand for this. We expected more of them. So the Hound, angered that his peaceful community was slaughtered, resolves to find the men responsible. These men are burned into his brain. He encounters a small group of them, among them 2 of the assailants. He kills them without anything, nothing, an axe, and then tracks down the others in the group, which leads him to the Brotherhood leadership, who he had fought his way out of. Beric, who he killed, Thoros of Myr, who he is familiar with. And they have already put nooses around the necks of the other men responsible for the attack. But they allow the Hound to personally hang 2 of them. Beric and Thoros then try to recruit the Hound into their newest mission, traveling north to fight a greater evil that threatens all of humanity, regardless of which banner you fall behind. The Hound accepts the offers when he takes 2 boots off one of the dead men, and so history is created. So then we're forwarded to season 7, and the Brotherhood, with the Hound now as part of the group, continues to march north under Beric and Thoros of Myr, They arrive at a farm once owned by a farmer encountered by the Hound during his travels with Aya. The Hound is reluctant to stay there, but the Brotherhood needs a place to stop and rest. It's snowing. Winter is there. And warm now that, it's too cold to go on. While some of the Brotherhood looks around for any hidden grain or wealth and throws lots of fire at a nearby hearth, the Hound and Beric mourn the skeletons of the farmer and his daughter and wonder how they died. Beric begins to postulate that they were starving, and rather than let his daughter starve to death, the father ends it quickly for both of them. The two sit down, and the hound wonders aloud why the Lord of the Light keeps letting, and I know it's the Lord of Light. I like to say Lord of the Light. It sounds more regal and gives a little more respect. But he keeps letting Thoros bring Beric back from the dead and expresses his continued disbelief in R'hllor. Thoros summons the hound to the fire he has lit and implores him to look into the flames, where the hound witnesses a vision of Eastwatch by the sea, along the wall and the mountain shaped like an arrowhead. He sees the White Walker and dead things marching to the wall, which disturbs him. Not much disturbs the hound. He actually had to fight his fear of the fire just to go there and see that. But he became a believer there. Excellent scene. Keep going back. Those two, great. Rory, love you, buddy. Now later, Thoros finds the hound digging graves for the farmer and his daughter. He mourns their deaths, saying that they did not deserve to die. This is when Thoros looks on very surprised at the hound, and he sees him as human for the very first time, not really realizing that the hound feels personally responsible for their deaths. Now, about a mile south of the wall, they are spotted and captured by a group of wildlings serving alongside Night's Watch at Eastwatch. Surprising that a group of wildlings can capture them. But again, lazy writing. I would like to see a little more of that. Shortly after this, King Jon Snow and his men arrive to travel beyond the wall to capture a white as evidence for the queens in the south. After Jon states that they do not have enough men, Tormund, my guy Tormund, leads into the cells to meet with Beric, Thoros, and the Hound, claiming that they want to go north of the wall too. Jon immediately recognizes the Hound after seeing him originally at Winterfell, and Gendry advises not to trust them since they sold him to Melisandre to be murdered. Jorah also recognizes Thoros after fighting alongside him in the Greyjoy Rebellion. That's when Thoros, you okay? They won't let me have my rum. Due to much tension in the room, Beric begins an impassioned speech that the Lord of the Light brought them all together. Beric, you'll be my leader anytime, buddy. But Sandor cuts him off and asks Jon if they're coming with them. Jon agrees, claiming that they are all on the same side because they're all breathing. Very pragmatic. Shows the leadership skills of Jon Snow. We're going to go over this particular scene in detail in Jon's podcast. So the Brotherhood, Jon, Jorah, Gendry, Tormund, and a few other wildlings then pass through the gate, and they're met with a giant snowstorm. Beyond the wall, Thoros is badly injured during the battle with that white snow bear and later dies. Beric grieves for his old friend and burns his body with the flaming sword. Now, Beric's grief was deeper because Beric understood that his next death would be his final death. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail because I don't think this scene is a Brotherhood of Banner scene. I think it's a more what I call the rebellion scene. So we're going to get into that more later on when we get into the final battle. But just to give you an idea, the Brotherhood is splintering at this point. There's not much left. Now, we don't see them again until season 8. They're led by Tormund and Beric now. The group of surviving Brotherhood, wildlings, and Night Watch, they make it to the last hearth. After escaping the fall of the wall, they find blood but no corpse in the courtyard of the castle. Going deeper into the dark castle, they stumble upon Edison Tollett and the survivors of the Night Watch. The group discovers Ned Umber dead inside the Great Hall, pinned against the wall, with a group of severed limbs in a spiral foundation around his body. Beric states that it's a message from the Night King when Ned Umber reanimates as a white, eyes blue, and slashes at Tormund with a knife. Beric burns him to send him on his way. An entire spiral symbol that was lit in that fire. On horseback, the Brotherhood reaches Winterfell, along with the other survivors. Eventually, they join the battle of the army of the dead. Beric Several other members were killed in the ensuing conflict. But I believe the Brotherhood died with Thoros of Myr. Beric was he was a zombie, was a ghost, and he went out like he lived as a hero. He was able to go out by serving his original leader and God, not the Lord of Light, but Ned Stark. Beric was another one who believed completely in the ideal of Ned Stark, into what Ned Stark was and what he wanted a man to be. And that's what Beric did. And at this point, that's when the Brotherhood goes away. Again, I want you to go to the book, though, and I want you to read up on the Brotherhood. There's one particular member, okay, that I want you to look at. And that member was brought back from the dead, too. Beric was not the only one that was brought back from the dead during their tenure with the Brotherhood without banners. Great group. Great group. This was an unabridged, very short version of who they are. We can actually go into detail, but it would cause us to have to give you a lot of definitions from the book. And I want to keep, I'm a purist right now, and I want to keep this close to Game of Thrones. We only have weeks, really, people, until the House of the Dragon. And we're going to be doing, as I said, 2, 3, maybe even 4 podcasts a week in regards to Game of Thrones. So we're going to be really busy. I appreciate all the messages, all the DMs. I appreciate all the patrons. We are sorry. We know we've been a little bit behind on the patron episodes, but I have a new patron episode coming out this week. So you will have your tantalized appetite whetted and satisfied all at the same time. We do have the YouTube channel going. We've been putting up podcasts on there, but we're going to be putting up more content. Again, I will be doing a live YouTube reaction. Also, it may be live on Instagram and Facebook too. Just depends if I want to give you that just yet. We're doing a lot on Zoom. Although we do have Southside Westeros Studios up and running, we haven't had our panel discussions yet. Although in the near future, we will be having in-studio panel discussions. So we got a lot more for you, people. It's coming. But I love you coming back every week. And the other character besides the Hood, is all I'll give you, is Dick, also known as Beardless Dick. He's a weird guy, along with Likely Luke, Notch, and Mudge. Check him out. But this is Southside Westeros. You know you can always check past episodes. We're available on all podcast platforms: Apple, Google, Spotify, Stitcher, Pandora, everywhere. Or you can go to Buzzsprout. But this is D. Paul, and again, thank you for coming through.